A crisp autumn morning in Washington, D.C., where golden leaves danced across the pavement as the sleek black limousine of then First Lady Melania Trump glided through the city streets. The usual hurried energy of the capital, with its power suits and briefcases, tourists clutching maps, and vendors calling out to passers-by, came to a sudden halt when something caught Mrs. Trump's eye through the tinted windows. There, on a weathered wooden bench near Lafayette Square, sat an elderly woman, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs, tears streaming down her deeply lined face. The morning sun cast long shadows across the scene, almost creating a spotlight on this moment of private grief. What happened in the next few moments would become one of the most touching and least-known stories of Melania's time as First Lady. The security detail, trained to expect every contingency, was caught completely off guard when Mrs. Trump did something entirely unprecedented. She ordered the driver to stop. Right there, in the middle of her scheduled route to a diplomatic event, breaking away from her carefully planned itinerary. The surprised driver had to confirm twice that he'd heard the instruction correctly. Nobody, from the Secret Service agents to the staff members accompanying her, could have predicted how this chance encounter would unfold, or how it would touch the hearts of everyone present that day. This isn't just another political story or carefully orchestrated public relations moment. It's a reminder that sometimes the most powerful moments happen when protocols are broken and humanity takes the wheel. As the limousine came to a stop, the Secret Service agents exchanged worried glances, their earpieces buzzing with concerned chatter. This wasn't part of the plan, and in Washington, deviations from plans were treated like security threats. But Melania Trump, dressed in an elegant cream-colored Dior suit and her signature Louboutin heels, stepped out of the vehicle with quiet determination in her eyes. The elderly woman, who we later learned was 78-year-old Martha Wilson, a lifelong resident of the district's historic Georgetown neighborhood, didn't even notice the First Lady approaching. She was too consumed by her grief, clutching what appeared to be an old, worn photograph in her trembling hands, its corners soft from years of handling. The bustling street fell into an eerie silence as onlookers froze in their tracks, watching in amazement as this surreal scene unfolded. Some pulled out their phones, hardly believing what they were witnessing, while others stood in respectful silence. Local shop owners stepped out onto their storefronts, and even the usually unflappable DC professionals slowed their hurried pace to witness this unexpected moment. Mrs. Trump, ignoring all the attention and the growing crowd, gracefully sat down next to Martha on the bench, her security detail trying to maintain their protective formation while giving the women space. It was a striking image. The First Lady of the United States, known for her reserved demeanor and carefully curated public appearances, setting aside all formality to comfort a stranger in distress. The contrast between Melania's polished appearance and Martha's worn winter coat and scuffed shoes made the scene even more poignant. But what happened next would show that sometimes the most meaningful connections happen when we look past these surface differences and recognize the shared humanity that binds us all. What began as a simple gesture transformed into a deeply moving conversation that would touch everyone who witnessed it. Martha, still wiping tears from her reddened eyes with a threadbare handkerchief embroidered with the initials J.W., revealed the source of her overwhelming distress. The photograph she held was of her late husband, James Wilson, a decorated Vietnam veteran who had passed away exactly 1 year ago that day. The image showed a handsome young man in his military uniform, his proud smile frozen in time. She explained, her voice trembling with emotion, how she'd been visiting their favorite park bench, where they had spent countless mornings sharing coffee and watching the city wake up during their 52-year marriage. They called it their little piece of paradise in the chaos of D.C. Melania listened intently, her hand resting gently on Martha's shoulder, her usual reserved expression softening with each word. The First Lady then shared something unexpected, her own experiences with loss and the importance of remembering loved ones, speaking with a warmth and openness that surprised even her closest staff members. She spoke about her own grandmother and the traditions of remembrance from her homeland. The two women, despite their vastly different lives, one a former model and First Lady, the other a retired schoolteacher, found profound common ground in their shared understanding of love and grief. Onlookers were struck by the genuine connection forming before their eyes, as language barriers and social differences melted away in the face of shared human experience. Some witnesses later reported seeing tears in Mrs. Trump's eyes as she listened to Martha describe the small daily moments she missed most. The sound of her husband's keys in the door, his favorite chair still sitting empty, the crossword puzzles they used to solve together every Sunday. This wasn't a photo opportunity or a planned publicity stop. It was a raw, human moment between two women from different worlds, finding solace in shared understanding. What happened next touched everyone's heart and demonstrated the power of spontaneous kindness. Melania reached into her designer purse and pulled out a personal business card, its golden White House seal gleaming in the morning light. With a Mont Blanc pen borrowed from her aide, she wrote something on the back, her perfectly manicured fingers moving with purpose. She handed it to Martha, explaining that she had arranged for her to receive a special private tour of the White House Rose Garden. A meaningful choice because James had been an avid gardener, and roses were his particular passion. He had even won local awards for his prize-winning American Beauty roses. But the First Lady didn't stop there. She made a call right there on the spot, speaking quietly but firmly into her phone, her accent more pronounced as she became more passionate about her request. Minutes later, a representative from the Veterans Affairs Office arrived, slightly out of breath from rushing over from the nearby federal building. It turned out Martha had been silently struggling with accessing her husband's veteran benefits for months, facing an overwhelming mountain of paperwork and bureaucratic red tape alone. The system that was supposed to support her had become a maze she couldn't navigate. Mrs. Trump instructed her team to personally oversee Martha's case, ensuring she would receive the support and benefits she deserved as the widow of a decorated service member. The small crowd that had gathered watched in amazement as the First Lady, who many had perceived as distant and reserved, demonstrated such genuine compassion and practical help. Her actions showed that true leadership often means cutting through bureaucracy to help one person at a time. Some witnesses were openly crying now, moved by this unexpected display of kindness and action. A nearby construction worker wiped his eyes with his dusty sleeve, while a young congressional intern pulled out her phone to call her own grandmother. The story quickly spread through the neighborhood like ripples in a pond, though it never made the major headlines or evening news broadcasts. Local residents began sharing their own encounters with Martha, revealing how she had become a beloved figure in the community. The woman who always remembered children's names, who kept a box of dog treats for neighborhood pets, who had taught at the local elementary school for over 3 decades. In the weeks that followed, Martha's life transformed in ways she never expected. Not only did she receive her overdue benefits, processed with unprecedented speed, but the White House Rose Garden visit became a deeply healing experience. She brought along her 3 grandchildren, Timothy, Sarah, and little James, sharing precious stories of their grandfather as they walked among the meticulously maintained blooms. The First Lady's staff had arranged for a small bronze plaque to be placed in a quiet corner of the garden, honoring James Wilson's service to his country and his love of roses. The head gardener even presented Martha with clippings from the garden's prized American Beauty roses, the same variety James had loved so much. But perhaps the most touching development was how this chance encounter inspired a chain reaction of kindness throughout the city. Other elderly veterans' widows in the area started receiving surprise visits from community members, offering support, companionship, and help with navigating complex benefit systems. The local veterans support group saw its volunteer numbers triple, many citing Martha's story as their inspiration. Coffee shops near her favorite bench started offering free coffee to veterans and their families. A simple act of stopping a limousine had somehow sparked a movement of compassion in the nation's capital, proving that even in the most political city in America, human connection could transcend partisan divisions. Today, Martha Wilson still visits that same park bench, but she's no longer alone in her grief. She's become something of a local grandmother figure, a living reminder of the power of kindness and connection. Every morning, she brings 2 cups of coffee, one for herself and one for James's memory, and shares her story with others who are dealing with loss. Young congressional staffers often stop to chat, seeking her wisdom about life and love. The photograph of her husband now sits in an elegant silver frame, a gift from Melania Trump, alongside a handwritten note from the First Lady that reads, "Love never truly leaves us. It lives in our memories and blooms anew in our hearts each day." The frame sits proudly on her mantelpiece next to a preserved rose from the White House garden. As for Mrs. Trump, this moment revealed a side of her that few had seen before, challenging public perceptions and reminding everyone that behind the carefully crafted public images lie real human beings capable of spontaneous compassion. During her last days in the White House, she made a point to visit Martha one more time, bringing a bouquet of roses from the very garden Martha had visited. The 2 women shared tea in Martha's modest living room, a scene that would have seemed impossible months before. The former model and First Lady perched on a well-worn armchair, admiring James's gardening awards and family photos. Their unlikely friendship reminded America that behind the titles, the politics, and the headlines, we're all human beings capable of touching each other's lives in profound ways. Martha later said it best when she told her grandchildren, "Sometimes angels don't have wings. Sometimes they come in limousines. And sometimes the greatest gifts come from the most unexpected moments." This simple encounter on a DC street proved that kindness knows no boundaries, that grief shared is grief diminished, and that the most powerful moments in life often happen when we simply stop, look around, and take the time to care. The bench where it all began now bears its own small plaque, reading simply, "Where kindness stopped and hope began."